On March 4th, 2025, a white sedan pulled into my bay just after lunch. The owner was a soft-spoken man in his mid-50s who drove the same route every day for 11 years. Same roads, same speeds, same gas station, same car. He sat across from me and said something I had not heard in a while. He said his car had started feeling different. Not broken, not loud, just different. Sluggish off the line, a little hesitant at highway speed. Fuel economy, slightly worse. No warning lights, no codes. The dealership told him his transmission was showing wear and that a service flush would be the first step toward what would likely be several $1,000s in repairs. He almost signed the paperwork before a neighbor told him to get a second opinion. That neighbor saved him over $2,000 because the problem was not the transmission. The problem was something most Western mechanics never even look for. A learned memory error buried inside the transmission control module, the kind of corruption that builds up silently over years of driving until the entire shift pattern feels wrong. And the fix was a procedure developed by Japanese engineers, quietly embedded into service manuals that most technicians never open. No parts, no fluid, no disassembly. 15 minutes and the car shifted like it had just rolled off the factory floor. That moment is why this video exists. Because this reset is real, it is documented, and almost nobody knows it exists. I have been working on imports for over 20 years, and I can tell you that Japanese automotive engineering operates on a philosophy that is fundamentally different from what most of us were taught. In Japan, especially inside companies like Toyota, Nissan, and Honda, engineers have always understood something that Western repair culture refuses to accept. Cars are not just mechanical systems. They are adaptive systems. They learn, they remember, they compensate. And when that memory becomes corrupted, no replacement part in the world will fix it. You have to address the data first. Here is what almost no one explains to drivers. Inside a modern Japanese transmission, there is a control module that is constantly observing how you drive. Every time you accelerate, the module notes how hard you pressed the pedal. Every time you brake before a corner, it notes the timing. Every time you shift from drive to reverse in a parking lot, it logs the speed. Over months and years, the module builds an incredibly detailed picture of your driving habits, and it adjusts shift points, clutch engagement pressure, and torque converter lockup timing to match. This is not a flaw. It is one of the most sophisticated engineering features in modern vehicles. But it becomes a problem when the driving data gets corrupted. Voltage fluctuations during weak battery starts, temperature extremes that cause modules to misread sensor signals, and short-trip driving patterns that never allow the system to reach full operating temperature all create small errors in the stored data. Unlike a computer that crashes and restarts, a transmission control module does not crash. It keeps operating with the corrupted data. It keeps making decisions based on a profile that no longer reflects reality. Slowly, imperceptibly, the shifts begin to feel wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just wrong in a way you cannot quite describe. Slightly late, a touch harsh, a half-second hesitation you feel in your chest when you merge onto the highway. Most drivers assume this is age. Most shops assume this is wear. Both are wrong. The Japanese solution to this problem is a procedure called a Transmission Control Module Adaptive Value Reset, often shortened to TCM. It is buried in service documentation for nearly every major Japanese manufacturer. Toyota calls it the Memory Clear procedure. Nissan refers to it inside the consult system as an Adaptive Value Initialization. Honda outlines it in their factory service manual as part of standard transmission control module diagnostics. These are not hacks. They are official procedures developed by the engineers who designed these vehicles. And they are almost never offered proactively by shops because a reset does not generate revenue. It does not justify a parts bill. It does not look impressive on a service ticket. It takes 15 minutes and saves thousands, which means it is bad for business and extraordinary for you. But the transmission control module is only part of the story. While Japanese engineers were refining transmission resets, they were also developing a broader philosophy called electronic initialization, a whole-vehicle approach to resetting adaptive values across multiple modules simultaneously. Not just the transmission, the engine control unit, the idle air control system, the throttle body position memory, the fuel trim baseline, the evaporative emissions monitor. All of it cleared, all of it forced to rebuild from a clean foundation. This is the reset most drivers have never heard of, and it is the one that changes everything. Think about what your car actually does every time you drive. The engine control unit is not just burning fuel, it is constantly adjusting. Short-term fuel trims respond in real time to sensor readings. Long-term fuel trims slowly lock in corrections based on patterns observed over weeks and months. The idle control system learns what your engine needs to idle smoothly at operating temperature, and then preloads that adjustment every cold start. The throttle body learns its exact rest position and uses that memory to calculate how far you are pressing the pedal relative to zero. All of this learned behavior is useful when the underlying data is accurate. But when any piece of that data becomes corrupted, the corrections compound. The engine compensates for a problem that no longer exists. The idle hunts at a speed that made sense 8 months ago but is wrong for today. The throttle feels dead off the line because the learned rest position drifted slightly during a voltage spike and was never corrected. And then someone puts the car on a lift, reads codes that are borderline or absent, replaces a sensor that was probably fine, and the car feels the same because the root problem was never the sensor. It was the accumulated learning built on top of a bad baseline. This is the uncomfortable truth about modern Japanese vehicles specifically. They are so adaptive, so sophisticated, that they can mask hardware problems and amplify data problems simultaneously. The same engineering that makes a Camry run smoothly at 200,000 miles is the same engineering that can make a perfectly healthy Camry feel broken after nothing more than a weak battery winter. I have seen this pattern more times than I can count. A driver brings in a Nissan Altima with sluggish shifts, rough idle, and poor fuel economy. The dealer quotes a valve body replacement. I perform the adaptive value initialization. Every symptom disappears. The valve body was never the problem. The data was the problem. I have seen it with Honda Accords. The throttle response dulls after a battery replacement. Not because anything broke, but because the throttle body position sensor lost its reference point, and the engine control unit rebuilt its fuel map on a corrupted baseline. A full electronic initialization, including an idle relearn with specific holds at specified revolutions per minute and at specific temperatures, restores everything. I have seen it with Toyota Corollas, Mazda 3s, Subaru Outbacks, and Mitsubishi Eclipses. Same pattern, different model, same root cause, data corruption mistaken for mechanical failure. And here is the part that should genuinely frustrate you. The procedures to fix this are in the manuals. They are documented. They are official. Toyota factory service documentation includes detailed initialization sequences that walk technicians through the exact steps required to clear adaptive values and guide the relearn process correctly. Honda manual specifies idle relearn procedures with exact coolant temperature, windows, and revolutions per minute hold times measured in seconds. Nissan Consult software has initialization routines built directly into the diagnostic interface. These were not added as afterthoughts. They were designed in from the beginning because engineers knew the adaptive system would eventually need to be reset. The knowledge exists. It is just never passed to the person paying the repair bill. Now here is where I need to be honest with you, because this is where people misuse this information and create new problems. A reset is not magic. It is not a cure for everything. And done incorrectly, it can make certain situations worse before they get better. The Japanese initialization philosophy is built on a specific sequence for a reason. You cannot simply disconnect the battery and assume the adaptive values have been properly cleared. Some modules retain memory through the body control module even when main battery power is removed. Certain Toyota systems require the ignition to cycle through a specific sequence with the climate control off, the steering wheel straight, and the vehicle stationary before the reset is accepted as complete. Honda throttle body relearns require the engine to idle at exactly the right temperature range for a precise number of seconds, then receive a specific throttle input pattern before the ECU accepts the new baseline. If you skip steps, the system partially relearns and the problem returns within days or weeks. That is why so many people try resets at home, see a brief improvement, and then conclude they do not work. They worked. The relearn failed. This is also why the reset must always be followed by a proper drive cycle. After clearing adaptive values, the vehicle needs to experience a controlled sequence of conditions: cold start idle, gentle warm-up, moderate acceleration, steady highway cruising, and deceleration. Japanese factory procedures often specify this as a standardized drive pattern that covers each phase of operation, so every module can rebuild its learned baseline using accurate data. The goal is not just clearing old information. The goal is replacing it with good information, cleanly, under controlled conditions. And here is the distinction that separates the reset from the repair. If you perform a complete electronic initialization and the problem returns within one full drive cycle, you have learned something invaluable. The problem is not a data error. It is a real fault. Now you stop chasing ghosts and start looking for the actual cause with confidence. But if you perform the reset and the problem disappears and stays gone through a week of normal driving, you just saved yourself from a repair that was never necessary. That is the real value of this procedure. Not just the fix itself, but the diagnostic clarity it provides. A reset turns uncertainty into information. The drivers who understand this stop being victims of the service system. They stop authorizing repairs based on fear. They stop assuming the worst the moment a symptom appears. Instead, they ask one question first: has the system been reset and relearned since this symptom appeared? If the answer is no, that is where they start. Not with a parts cannon, not with a worst-case estimate, with a clean slate and 15 minutes of patience. The silver sedan that came in that afternoon left without a repair order. The owner shook my hand twice in the parking lot. He sent me a message 3 weeks later. It was still shifting perfectly, and the fuel economy was better than it had been in 2 years. He said it felt like a different car. It was not a different car. It was the same car, finally operating on accurate information again. Modern Japanese vehicles do not age the way people assume. They do not gradually wear into confusion. They drift there quietly, through accumulated learning built on imperfect data. Once you understand that drift, you understand the reset. Not as a trick or a workaround, but as a fundamental part of owning a sophisticated, adaptive vehicle. It is the kind of maintenance that should happen every few years, whether or not a symptom has appeared. It is the kind of procedure that keeps a Camry feeling sharp at 180,000 miles. It is the kind of knowledge that separates drivers who feel helpless in front of a service advisor from drivers who already know the first question to ask. Before you authorize your next repair, before you agree to a flush, a replacement, or a module swap, ask whether the adaptive values have been cleared and relearned. If the technician pauses or looks uncertain, you already have your answer. Reset first. Observe. confirm. Then decide. If this changed how you see your car, hit like so more drivers find it before the next unnecessary repair bill finds them first. Subscribe if you want to keep thinking like a technician instead of a customer. Drop a comment if you have ever had a problem disappear after a reset that a shop wanted to charge you hundreds to fix. Those stories need to be heard. Because the most expensive thing about modern car ownership is not the repair itself. It is not knowing the reset existed.